Thank you for clicking the link to hear the full-length story of how Ashley and I came to Waukesha, Wisconsin. Like I said before, it all started with a pain point, and that pain point happened on May 29th of 2009 when my father passed away. And it really sent me into this dark, deep depression of what's next. I was struggling with where I was supposed to be. Ashley and I were dating, and so it sent me on this prayer journey of asking God what He wanted for my life and what He wanted from my life. And on Father's Day, just a few weeks later, I found myself in my father's office cleaning out his office. Probably not the best day to go and clean out his office, but I wanted to be where he was at. And as I was cleaning out his office, I became very emotional. I was packing books away, and so I decided to go into the sanctuary, into the auditorium to pray. And I remember just crying out to God and asking Him what He wanted for my life. I was very angry. And if anybody had walked in there, they would have probably had me committed, because it was just an honest conversation that I was having with the Lord. And so as I was praying, I just remember asking God what He wanted for my life. And I felt like He said to fast and pray about it. And it made me even more angry, because I was like, I am praying, God, and I don't want to fast. That's the last thing that I want to do. And so I left there pretty upset. But I remember praying over the next couple of weeks, just asking God what He wanted. And I felt like He kept giving me those same answers to fast and pray about it. And so finally in July, I gave in, and I was going to take 3 days to fast and pray about the direction that the Lord had for my life. And those 3 days turned into 5. And on that 5th day, I felt like God had put church planting in Milwaukee in my heart, which is crazy because I didn't know anything about church planting and I had never been to Milwaukee. And I said, okay, Lord, if you're leading us to go up to Milwaukee to plant a church, I hope that you would confirm this. Would you confirm this for us? And He did. About a week later, He confirmed it 3 times in a single day. And during this time, as I was home taking care of my father, he had colon cancer, which spread to his liver and his lungs, I was waiting tables at Applebee's. And this particular day, I was bartending at Applebee's, and we were located in a mall about 3 miles off the highway. And so you had to really want Applebee's. And I remember working that day, and it was the middle of the afternoon, and nobody was in the restaurant, and a guy walks in, and he sits down at the bar, and I'm a bartender, so I just strike up a conversation with him and asked him what he was up to. He said he was passing through. I asked him where he was passing through to. He said, back home. I said, well, where's home? He said, Milwaukee. And every hair on my body shot up. I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And so we finished our conversation about Milwaukee, and he left. And a little bit later that afternoon, Milwaukee was all over the news. I can't tell you what for. I just remember seeing Milwaukee all over the news that day. And then that night, driving home, we were the last exit before we crossed into the state of Indiana. I was getting off the exit, and the car right in front of me had a Wisconsin license plate. And so I was like, okay, Lord, I'm like, you've got my attention. I don't know what this looks like, church planting. I don't know what Milwaukee looks like, but I believe that this is what you're saying. And in that moment, I felt like God said, yes, I am leading you up there to plant a church, and it is in Milwaukee, but it's not the right time. And so it wasn't. My mom was still there in Cincinnati, and my little sister was there, and I needed to help my mom get situated and help my little sister get situated, and my brother ended up moving back home to kind of help them out, which freed me to go back down to Florida, where I had graduated school, to be with the girl that I was dating, Ashley at the time, to see if we were supposed to be together. She had a year left of school, and so it just made sense for me to go back down there to be where she was at. So I left to go back down to Florida in August of 2009. And just a few weeks after I got there, I wanted to see where she was at. Now, we're just dating at the time, so if she wanted to get out and run, she could have got out and run at that time. But we were going somewhere, and we got to where we were going a little early, and I remember sitting in the car with her, and I just asked her, I was like, hey, do you ever see yourself leaving Tallahassee? Now, she grew up in Tallahassee, both sides of her family are from Tallahassee, and all she knows is Tallahassee. And so I asked her, I said, hey, do you ever see yourself leaving Tallahassee? And she's like, to do what? I said, to go plant a church. And she said, where? I said, Milwaukee. She said, no. It's freezing up there. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. And I just shared with her what I just shared with you. But I told her, I said, Ashley, if God's leading us up there to plant a church in Milwaukee, he's not just leading me, he's leading both of us. And so I need God to speak to you just as much as he spoke to me about this. And I won't bring this up until you're ready to talk about it. Well, that took her 5 years to come around and talk about the possibility of going to Milwaukee to plant a church. And so we continue to date, and things progress in our relationship, and we actually get engaged on May 28th of 2010, and a position opened up at her home church in Tallahassee for me to be the student pastor. So I started there June of 2010, and then we got married in December 31st of 2010. And so everything was good, life's good, we're happily newly marrieds, and about 3.5 years into that journey, the guy that hired me was transitioning out. And usually when the senior pastor transitions out, everybody might be transitioning out. It's like bringing a new coach on staff. He might restaff his entire coaching staff. So I was preparing myself for that. And I remember praying and asking God, are you still leading us up to Milwaukee to plant a church? Now, Ashley hasn't said anything, but Milwaukee has always been on my heart. And we actually got Ashley tickets to see the musical Wicked down in Anna Maria Island, or in Tampa. And so we go down to Tampa, and her aunt and uncle live in Anna Maria Island. And so we're staying with them. We go see the show. We come back after the show, and I tell Ashley, with everything that's going on with Matt transitioning and everything that's taking place at the church, I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to go and pray and just ask God to see where we're at in this whole process. And so I go outside, and her aunt and uncle live right on the ocean. So I walk outside, and I'm walking on the deck towards the dock. And as I start to pray and ask God, are you still sending us to Milwaukee to plant a church? I hear this loud clanking sound. And I look over to my right, and there's this huge flagpole in their neighbor's yard, and it's all lit up. And there's this huge American flag just flowing. And right below it is a blue Wisconsin state flag. And so every hair on my body shot up again, and in that moment, I felt like God saying, yes, I'm leading you up there to plant a church, but it's still not the right time. And it wasn't. We were able to help the church go through the transition that it needed to go through and see what the senior pastor position looked like from that perspective. And Ashley still hadn't said anything about going to Milwaukee to plant a church. And so I held it. I held it all in. I kept it to myself, and I continued to pray about it. Well, about 1.5 years later, so we're 5 years out, Ashley starts to ask me about Wisconsin. She starts asking me about Milwaukee. What's life like up there? What's this whole journey with church planting look like? And so I knew God was stirring something in her heart to transition and to move. And so we started to explore Wisconsin, Milwaukee, church planting. And the question became where? Where are we going to go up to Milwaukee and plant a church? And on May the 7th of 2015, I wake up a little early that morning. We had to go to a friend's kid's birthday party later that day. And so I wanted to get up early that morning, just pray about where and ask God where. And so I'm praying, and I felt like God wanted me to open a map up. And so I'm looking at this map. And as I'm praying over this map of Milwaukee and the greater Milwaukee region, this little place called Waukesha popped up off the map. I know it's pronounced Waukesha now, but at that time I didn't know how to pronounce it. And so I'm praying over this map, and Waukesha is just popping. It's literally illuminating off the map. And so I just closed the map up, and I said, God, if you're leading us to Waukesha, you'll confirm it like you've confirmed everything else. I really believe it. I didn't think it was going to be that day, though. And so as I said, we had to go to a friend's birthday party, or a friend's kid's birthday party. And we're getting in the car, and we're getting ready to get on the highway, and we're going to Bonifay, Florida, which is about 1.5 hours west of Tallahassee. And as we're getting on the highway, I tell Ashley, I'm like, hey, I think it's this place called Waukesha. I think this is where we're supposed to go and plant a church. And I told her to think about it, to pray about it, and really we just tabled the conversation. And as we're driving, I'm trying to make travel arrangements for my brother's wedding, which is out in Irvine, California. So I'm on the phone, I've got the GPS on, and I'm not really paying attention to where I'm going because I'm looking at the GPS, and we're approaching the exit that we're supposed to get off at. And we have been out there before because it's one of our best friends' kids that we're going to their birthday party for. And the GPS had us get off an exit early. And so I'm listening to the GPS, I'm on the phone, and I get off this exit, State Route 79, and I'm just driving. And as I'm driving, the GPS says to make a right, so I make a right down the street, and GPS says your destination's on the left. So we pull into somebody's driveway, and there's this little kid playing t-ball in his front yard, looking at us like, why are you in my driveway? And I remember looking at Ashley saying, I know where we're going, I don't know why the GPS had us get off an exit early. And so I backed out of the driveway, and I started back for that main road that we were on. And as we approached that main road, what I didn't know was that main road had turned from State Route 79 into Waukesha. And so we pull up to this stop sign, and I freak out. I drop the phone, and I point, I'm like, Ashley, it's Waukesha. And she freaks out because we are literally just talking about Waukesha. And so in that moment, we knew that this is where we were supposed to be. So we make plans and prepare to move to Waukesha, and we start getting things in order. And we resigned from the church on February 28th of 2016. And then we jump on a plane just 4 days later on March the 3rd to fly up to Milwaukee to come and explore Waukesha for the first time. And we're here for about 3 days. We didn't know anybody, and we left on March the 6th to fly back down to Florida. And like I said, this whole thing started with a pain point, but it also ended with a pain point, because when I was making travel arrangements for my brother's wedding in Irvine, his wedding was July of 2015. And when we got out there, it was July 4th weekend, and we found out that my mom was sick. She had stomach cancer. And so when I got back home from Milwaukee on March the 6th, I jumped on a plane March the 7th to fly out to Phoenix to be with her for her last month and a half of life, and she ended up passing away on April the 2nd of 2016. And so again, this sent me back into this dark depression, this spiral of why and what's next. And I didn't want to come up here. I fought God really every step of the way until he asked me a question. And I felt like he asked me, do you want to honor your parents? And it really made me angry, because I was like, what kind of question is that? Of course I want to honor my parents. And so I felt like he said, well, what they planted inside of you wasn't meant to die with them, it was meant to live on through you. And so I really had to digest that, and it took me a few weeks of struggling with it, and I finally said, okay, Lord, yeah, I definitely want to honor my parents, and if Waukesha is where you want us to plant a church, and if this is the way that I can honor my parents and what they've planted inside of me, then we'll go there, because whatever they've deposited in me is meant to live on through me. And so we continue to make preparations and plans, and we left Tallahassee on July 29th, and we got here July 31st. And just a few weeks after that, in August, I was actually down in my basement, and I was just praying and thanking God for the journey. And I felt like God asked me another question. I felt like he said, I'm a word guy, I like the origin of words, and I like numbers. And I felt like he asked me how much time has passed since I first planted that seed of planting a church in Waukesha. How much time has passed since then? And so I thought about it, and I was like, well, it's July 2016 when we moved up here, so 7 years. 7 years to the month. And I felt like what he said in my spirit was, that's the number of completion. So what I planted in your heart in May, or in July of 2009, I've brought to completion in July of 2016. And so the journey now begins for you to go into Horizon Church and plant Horizon Church. And so that's our story. That's how we came to Waukesha, Wisconsin. And thank you so much for listening to the full-length story.